or I can't, everything that I believe up until this point is challenged, and it fractures a worldview there. So how do we get people to kind of see that but still maintain control of their sanity? And do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We're going deep today, but
effectively functions as a digital economy already.
Right.
Like, people aren't using cash. People are using credit and debit cards. Well, what
like crypto, things like land, ideally productive land. Obviously, gold and silver are things that people look at who are thinking in these ways. Where's your food and water come from? What's the climate that you live in? And what does life look like where you're at if the current infrastructure of goods and resources, or just sort of the kind of support that exists for the economy overall were to lessen, were to become not what it is. They're off the tax rolls and have no accounting systems. The first paragraph, according
can have any type of animal they want to grow, cows, pigs, goats, sheep, whatever it is. There's almost no regulations. If there's any, I don't think there's any regulations.
Not to my knowledge, there may be, but...
Which, for some people that like regulations, they might think, well, the pig farmer, he's not growing the right types of pigs, and they need to vaccinate the animals and give them medication, and that's why they have to be regulated so the consumer doesn't get sick, right? Whereas in Ecuador, you buy raw milk from the farmer directly from the cow on the same day, basically, right? With no receipts, no anything. So we don't know exactly how they act. Don't declare anything, because those are the types of businesses, basically. They grow the food on their land, they sell it to people on the street or wherever it is in stores, and there's very little accounting, if any.
Or out of their store,
out of their house, buying directly from the farmer with no tax, with no regulation, anything, all cash, goes directly to them, and I know where my food comes from.
Hello and welcome back to the Ecuadorian Insider Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Jesse, Carl, Brandon, good to be with you guys. Guys, right now, take 10 seconds. Press like, please. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell. It's a bell, Carl, and they hit it, and then they get notified when we put out content. Could be for better or worse. And then they can watch it and make comments, which is what we want. So
that's a great idea.
Make some comments, guys. Let us know. What are the topics you'd like to hear addressed? What are the things you'd like us to talk about in future episodes? What did you guys think of any of these past episodes? How'd you like the ladies pod? Have you watched that? Check that out on the channel. Just came out last week. So we're going to dive into a number of topics on today's show. We're going to talk a little bit about busting out of the matrix and what that means in the context of Ecuador. Are there solutions here for people who want to be more free from the system, more independent, more self-sufficient, more secure in that, that sense of security? We're going to talk about some of those kinds of things today. We're also going to talk about, some of the inconveniences of life here. What is what's the biggest pain in the ass? Like, the sidewalks don't work. You got to step 6 feet down to get from one level of the sidewalk to the other.
In some cases.
And so we all walk on the street. But,
it makes you more agile.
That's right. It's an agility drill.
Seriously.
Well, and you're more aware. You're always aware of your surroundings. You're paying attention to where you're walking.
That's true.
You can't just be on your phone walking like Jesse does sometimes. Or he's just on his phone Jesse, look up, bro. Walk. The stairs are uneven.
The two of these beautiful people are so addicted to their telephones.
It's so not true.
I am fairly addicted as well. We're talking about having kids in Ecuador. Carl and I have both had children here. Was it hard to push it out?
I've birthed 2 children.
Birthed 2 children. Yeah.
Birthed.
Birthed. He's birthed a lot of children. And we're talking about what that's like here in Ecuador, raising kids here. We'll touch on that a little bit as well, and like that. So let's jump right in. So guys, I think if you're of the school of thinking that there's an existing system in the world which is not conducive to the best capacity, the best potential of human life, and that involves, whatever you think it involves. Maybe it involves the money system. Maybe it involves sort of how controlled things are, how regulated things are. Maybe it involves things like media and education. Maybe it involves food supply. Maybe it involves, a million other things, right, that people think about and care about. And so what does it mean, if you're looking to get away from that? I think there's some common themes, right? So people want to say, okay, well, people want to be more in control of their own lives, I think, right? If you're going to get out, you're going to kind of bust out of the matrix, right? You're going to want to have less reliance on systems in general, society in general, those kinds of things. So you're probably interested in things like, where does my food come from? Where does my water come from? Where are my assets? Where is my wealth allocated? Is it safe? Is it, does it make sense to have my assets in things? Are the things my assets in, do they make sense going into the future based on a potentially changing playing field? If you're worried about debt bubbles, if you're worried about wars, if you're worried about things like that.
Do we want to take a step back and maybe define some of that? Define like some of the matrix. What do you mean by that? Is it, because we can talk about, because people may think about in the States maybe being on the hamster wheel, keeping up with the Joneses. Well, that's part of the matrix, right? In a way, we can define it. So maybe we can take a step back, define some of the matrix, and then even some of the things that you were talking about in the beginning. Maybe people have this, I think a lot of us have this innate sense of things that are happening, but can't really put your finger on what exactly it is. And then some people here, we've fleshed through some of that stuff and we've identified some of those things. So maybe we can share, what some of those concerns with the food supply, with the money supply, with some of those control mechanisms that we've identified as in place in some way, where some people that are just starting this journey maybe don't fully understand. Maybe that could be a good way to kind of share at least maybe a broad brush on some of those with a little bit of detail, and then maybe in a future episode we can deep dive into some of that. But maybe that helps frame breaking out of the matrix. Let's define what it is and what some of those controls are. Was that? Yeah?
Yeah, man, but you're first.
Yeah. I'm teeing you up, bro.
Damn it.
You've got it probably fleshed out more than anybody I've ever met.
Oh my gosh, the bar just got the expectations.
Well, no, I mean, just
you gotta set expectations here.
Yeah. No, you got to exceed. I believe in you.
All right.
No, but I just mean like the interplay between some of those things. You have that pretty thought out. You thought it out well, and then so you can speak to those and how they play together. And then Carl and I, obviously, we've been here now. We have very similar opinions on a lot of that stuff, but we can add color. But you have the framework pretty structured.
Sure. I mean, so I guess the only way for me to address that, I would say but we'll see, is, so I go back to, like, realizing the world was not quite as I thought, to, like, 2010-11 was when that started for me. At that time, I was getting an MBA, and I was investing in real estate in New York City. That was my, that's my life path at that point. And I was on a pretty good track, but in what context, right? So if you're the CEO of McDonald's in the matrix world, for lack of a better term, you're in a pretty good spot, right? Maybe you've got a smart house with all of your, you can talk to it and it'll I want to say inappropriate things, but I won't. You can talk to it and it'll do, respond to you, and you obviously, financially you'd be in a pretty good spot. You probably invested in the stock market, and as your world, they used to say, maybe they still do, diversification is stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Right. Maybe throw a little U.S. real estate in there. Yep. Maybe probably not any gold and silver or really hard assets, but stock, bonds, mutual funds, right? And so anyway, I'm at that time I'm doing deep dives on all kinds of things, right? I'm understanding the money system, which from my perspective is actually the most important thing, you could understand if you're trying to understand the control mechanisms that exist on Earth. The debt-based monetary system, which every country on Earth has, is no, not almost, is
some of those dictators.
No.
North Korea, they don't have a privately owned central bank. I thought there's still a short list of like. No.
Me and you have had this conversation before, but I think what those are referring to is that they would say, I wouldn't necessarily agree with this. They would say that it's not like a Rothschild-controlled central bank versus they still have central. I don't believe, to my knowledge. Correct me in the comments if there's a country in the world that has, currency that's issued debt-free. I do not believe that exists on Earth. And you start to ask some questions when you start to figure these things out. Like, how is money actually created? Is I would encourage everybody to actually understand the mechanics of money creation, because it is not what you think if you haven't looked into it. And then you start to ask questions like, well, why is every country on Earth in debt? Right? And to who? Who's the lender? If every, theoretically, if you have a playing field and it's a zero-sum game and there's a certain amount of money, and none of this is true. I'm just saying, if it were that way, and me and the three of us have however much resources we have, if we lend each other money, someone's the creditor, someone's the debtor, there should be creditor nations. If some nations are in debt based on the credit of who, well, again, this all comes back to the money supply. The nations, are put into debt based on borrowing money into existence, which then creates the necessity. We're going way deeper on this than I expected. But then creates the necessity to pay back interest on the existing currency that's in circulation. To who? Go look and find out. Right. But anyway, so you start to get in, things like the money system, things like the food supply. So what's in the food, where does it come from, and if there's issues with the money system, right? If you go back and look historically, most, if not all, of the depressions and chaos and problems and financial problems and wars and so are generally precipitated or come out of certain parts of the money cycle of the money cycle. So those things are almost kind of scheduled to some degree. Like if you understand wealth cycles and money creation and how all of that works, there becomes sort of mathematical points where certain things have to take place for it to continue on, for it to work. And so you get things like financial collapse, debt market collapse, wars, in order to fix the accounting, essentially, on the money supply. So then you say, okay, well, if any of those things are possible, they have a lot of ramifications, right? Because then you get into well, how am I going to eat? And what is the value of my assets in an environment like that? And what about my personal safety and security and all these kinds of things? And so, partly for me, right, the drawback of the U.S., for example, where I'm from, but I think this is true in most of the world, and it's true to some extent everywhere in the world, but one of the big drawbacks for me about a place like the U.S. is that it's a finely tuned machine in terms of its control mechanisms. Yep. You're not doing anything against the government. If the government has a law or a whatever, regulation even, that's not a law, right? However they are implementing the code. If you'd like to, I saw examples of, farmers in Michigan who the government came in and killed all of their pigs because it was the wrong breed. Right, it's supposed to be the pink pig that we all think is there's hundreds of varieties of pigs. Some farmer out in, and this has happened, this is just an example, some farmer out in Michigan, I saw this thing where he's got his herd or whatever they call them of pigs, and they told him by this date you've got to convert to the pink pig that everyone knows about. and he didn't want to because these other pigs had much better qualities. Like their meat was better, they're more resistant to disease, whatever. They're more. It's like a more diverse gene pool for that. And they literally, like, he stood his ground, and so they came in and shot all his pigs in the head. You know, like that was it's just an example, right? Yeah. But we've seen these kinds of things over and over again. Like, there's how many people in the U.S., for whatever reasons, we can agree or disagree on their reasons. There's probably been lots of different reasons, but they say, okay, we're going to go off and start our own community and set our own rules and do it our way. They get taken out. You know, those communities don't last very long. Whether, you know, there's a guy in town, Buddha, who used to live with Osho out in, I think it was Oregon, where they had that big community, and, like, you know, they were up against it. There's you know, there's the what is it, the Waco, right? And those guys, I don't even know what their shtick was, but I think they, like, basically burned them alive, essentially, to, you know, for again, wherever you come down on that stuff, whatever. But anyways, the control mechanisms are strong. You know, I can't give you a service in the U.S. of almost any kind without a license.
Right. Yeah, and then they regulate things, like they enforce the regulation more so than other places, like, well, definitely more so than Ecuador. In Europe, they regulate, you know, they enforce regulation, but Canada, they enforce regulation pretty well. But the U.S., it is, you're right, it's a fine-tuned machine where it's, yeah, if they don't like what you're doing, you're gonna get either something like that to the extreme where your pigs get shot, or you're gonna get fined, or you're gonna get garnished. And they do that stuff, and a lot of times it's with lobbies. It's with, you're doing something that some corporation doesn't want want you to do. They don't want the competition, so they just put pressure on the regulators to, because why would they care about some guy having pigs on his farm? He's not doing anything, you know, it's not harming anybody else. He just likes the, you know, this quality of the meat. Why is that such a big deal? Because somebody else made it a big deal. Yeah. They lobby the regulation. They lobby the regulators. You know, they can, you know, in Ecuador, you've talked about many times how, you know, everybody knows the corruption in the country, but it's more out in front. Yeah. You know, like the bribes are out front. In the U.S., it's behind the scenes. It's pomp and circumstance. It's under the table. It's not. It's not.
It's at a higher level.
It's more sophisticated.
It's more sophisticated.
Much more sophisticated. And that's kind of something I want you to touch on. Like, I think because of the sophistication of the control mechanism and the conditioning of the populace in the general population in the States and in Canada, there's a lot of people that are going to listen to what, you know, how you're describing, and they're saying, well, that's not true. Like, I'm not controlled that way. That's conspiracy, you know. So let's try and talk about how you broke out of that, or how people can think differently about that, so that they can kind of grasp that. Because a lot of people, when they start questioning or going down some of these, like, it's like this cognitive dissonance, or their worldview gets fractured, and it's almost like, I get the shakes. I can't, you know, like, if that's true, then what have I done with my life? Or I can't, you know, everything that I believe up until this point is challenged, and, you know, it fractures a worldview there. So how do we get people to kind of see that, but still maintain control of their sanity? And do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We're going deep today, but you can't, in my opinion. Like, you're better at it than I am. Like, you've taken the approach I've noticed, you know, with where you'll kind of give people the breadcrumbs, and I think that's probably the only way to do it. Because everyone has to come to their own realizations about everything in their life. Like, nobody can do that for anybody else. You know, we can't do it for one another. Right. And, you know, the way I look at those things is, it's like, you mentioned cognitive dissonance, which is the right word, but it's, you know, it's like people tie their identities to whatever they've been told is true. Right. So it's like, we identify with sports teams the same way we identify with knowing that we went to the moon, or knowing that the money that our government looks out for our interests, or whatever, like whatever our beliefs are, or that, you know, that could never happen, right? You'll hear people say, like, years ago when I used to care about this kind of stuff, and I was trying to talk to people, and it was like, oh, that, you know, that could never happen, is the kind. But that's because of exactly what you said, right? It's like, people are conditioned, they have a belief system, and then that conditioning and belief system becomes people's identity, and then you're threatening their life by telling them, hey, what you don't know is your identity, but is actually your identity, is incorrect.
Right.
Well, then it's like, well, I'm gonna die then because that's my identity. It's like I'm incorrect. I'm, and so
yeah.
And so, I mean, gosh, I spent a lot of time taking actions that backfired.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to give people information they don't want.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of, maybe that's like the beauty of the time we're in right now too, is that, all these things that seem to be buried or that weren't near the surface or weren't available from an information perspective or from just an even understanding, it seems like they're becoming more and more available. Things are getting, revealed. I don't know what the right even word is, but like truth is coming out. Truth is coming to the surface, and people are seeing things, and they're being able to go back now and look at other things differently. Going back to 9/11 or other things, or COVID, or even all the way back to the Vietnam War, John F. Kennedy, all these things that have been conspiratorial, we're getting more and more information that's coming out from authoritative sources, and people are like, whoa, okay, that's different. And, you mentioned how sometimes wars, the money cycle kind of predicts or is predictive of lots of things geopolitically, and it appears like we're at one of those points now where you see those debt cycles, you see what's happening, and then at the same time you're seeing this controversy in the Middle East bubble up, and you're seeing all these big major players in Iran and Russia and all these things. Now, is it the chicken and the egg? Which comes first? But when you go back and you look at history, it's often these, either black swan events or wars. Like, everybody can see where this one's progressing, either a global war or a large, even if it's not the globe or the world, if it's just a few major countries, or this black swan event. Often those aren't accidents. They're really to get everybody to focus here while something else is happening behind the scenes. September 11th, that was, Rumsfeld came out the day before September 11th, and we lost $4 trillion. We don't know where it went. $4 trillion, it's gone, right? Then September, nobody cares about it anymore when you have, planes crashing into buildings that everybody sees. So the same thing, like, it seems like things are trending towards some type of global conflict, but is that, it's almost makes me question, is that really what's happening, or is there going to be a true black swan event? Because when you look at the metrics behind everything else in the money cycle, we probably have seen the top. We're very close to the top in the stock market. We've seen the top. People that follow this stuff that I talk to in the financial world, they're all talking about waiting until the Fed pivots. It's just, we need enough pain for the Fed to pivot, lower interest rates.
Back to easy money. Yeah.
Back to easy money. And I've studied this. There was when I was going back to college getting my degree, there was a hedge fund manager named Bill Fleckenstein, and he used to write an article on Yahoo weekly or a couple times a week. And I started asking him questions, and then he started reaching out to me, and he started, I had a relationship with him, and I would ask him all these complicated questions, and he gave me all this access to his proprietary stuff, and he had a newsletter, a paid stuff, so I started following, and I was learning a ton from him. And he wrote this book where he studied, the Federal Reserve in the U.S. really deeply. He wrote a book on Greenspan's bubbles, and he talked about concepts where, the Federal Reserve boards would meet, and then they would give public, summaries of their meetings, in real time, right after the meetings, but they wouldn't publish the minutes to their meetings until 6 months later. So most people don't even have the time or understand where to even look to go, hey, are the things they said to the public even what they actually talked about behind the scenes? And he would, so he talked to me about all that, and that's definitely not congruent. The things they talked about behind the scenes oftentimes were in general, they were what they talked about to the public, but so much more color and detail behind the scenes about what they were actually doing. And then through this, you know, we've had the pivots before. What people don't realize, they want the pivot, but what happens is when we go back to the pivot, the credit markets freeze up first. People forget that the credit markets freeze up. Because interest rates, you know, everybody's dumping money into the bond market. So when that stuff happened, bonds keep falling in value as interest rates rise, right? So then all of a sudden, when the credit market frees up, investors sell off bonds and stocks. They prefer to go buy treasury bills, because it might do better, you know, have better returns amidst high interest rates. But the Fed pivot itself, when they go back to printing money in response to stocks drop at that time. So when we're praying for this, hey, we just need the Fed to pivot to get to easy money, go back and look at the history. Stocks drop every time they pivot. Every time. It's not. Does that mean it's going to happen this time? No. This time it's different. It won't, you know. So you look at all the metrics underlying. We're probably at a top in the stock market. You're probably at a top in the residential and commercial real estate markets in the West. Bonds are going to keep falling in value because the Fed is not pivoting. They're still raising rates. So those people are stuck, man. And then you look at crypto, and you look at what that could offer. And I don't know, man, because the story for the blue chips like Bitcoin was they're going to be the hedge against inflation. Well, guess what? We're seeing massive inflation. We're seeing all of this. And what happened with crypto? Crypto traded with any other risk-on asset in the market. They didn't differentiate. They weren't separate. They you know. So
see, that's interesting, isn't it?
Right. So I don't know if you know, crypto could be an answer in the sense that when the cycle bottoms and starts the next bull, could they proliferate returns at a quicker rate than these other asset classes? You know, I can get behind that, but they're not different than other risk-on assets at this point through the history that we have in this short period of time of, how long has Bitcoin been around, Carl? 11 years? 10, 12 years? I don't even know.
2008.
2008. Okay, so 20 years almost, 15 years, 13 years, whatever it is. I can do math. But it's a relatively new market, and we're going in, you know, if we're defining crypto cycles by the halvening, what have we had? 3? Is this the 4th? I don't even know. It's coming up.
Like that, 3rd or 4th, yeah. So
I don't know. It's just interesting for me to see all this stuff that's happening in the world, and is the controversy, the conflicts, the world conflicts, is that a result of where the financial credit asset markets are, or is it the opposite? Is it the conflicts are arising because this stuff exists and it's happening? And the other piece would be, well, we know that they've openly talked about, governments, government agencies, world governments have talked about the global currency reset.
Yeah, that's right.
So when you have all these debt-based countries that you've talked about, and you have these not only unfunded liabilities, but they have these deficits that are they're not mathematically possible to ever pay back. So when they're not backed by any physical asset, it's just faith at that point that we're going to keep borrowing, or we're going to keep doing things and keep printing or not printing, etc. So, you know, that's because every country is doing that. That's why a global currency reset is real. Like, they're talking about it. So what does that look like? You know, I don't know if we have the answers on what that looks like, but we do know that the quantum financial system, the blockchain based system, it's running concurrently right now. So we know the systems of, and that's, yes, that's protected, it's, you know, anonymous, yada yada, but blockchain in and of itself, that imposes control, because now everything you do with your money is blockchain to an address. that you can't really run from. Like, you can't hide from that anymore. It's anonymous unless somebody, you know, wants to impose regulation on you, right? Yeah, I don't. It's interesting. It's interesting to see, you know, where we go from here, and what do asset classes do? What does the global conflict look like? How does that materialize? I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I think this is a fun topic, man. I didn't know we were getting into all this.
It's very interesting. I am looking at stats for Bitcoin, though, and Bitcoin's gone up 107% this year. Yeah. And I don't think that any other assets have gone up 100%.
Yeah,
doubled.
You're looking at a very short time period. Like, it's correlated with all risk on assets over the cycle. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's gone up 444% in the last 5 years, so it's almost 100% a year.
It's right.
For the last 5 years.
Right. You're not understanding. So you're
buy Bitcoin. # buy Bitcoin, buy crypto, and precious metals. That's where I stand.
This is not financial advice.
This is not financial advice.
Except
not for me, especially.
Only Carl is giving financial advice. So.
Yeah. No. So
I am not the finance guy.
So that's what I meant when the asset can proliferate at a quicker rate than other assets in the class on those those cycle trend turns. But it's not different. It's when inflation hit, everything dropped. Did Bitcoin drop? What was Bitcoin's high?
It's definitely a lot higher than now. About double what it's
now. It was almost 70,000.
Yeah.
And it's what now? 30,000?
35, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so...
But it's a highly volatile asset. There's a lot of speculation, and price moves very quickly because it's got a very small market cap. And it's done that historically. There's been...
Right, but it didn't trade differently than other risk-on assets.
Right.
Point.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
In terms of the trend.
Yes.
In terms of the trend.
It does whatever the others do.
But that was the narrative, that Bitcoin and crypto were different. They were going to be the hedge. They were going to be the crypto gold and silver, even though we know the crypto or the gold and silver markets are manipulated by the paper markets anyway, so the price is manipulated. So it actually can't trade relative to supply and demand, etc., when there's interest rate changes. But Bitcoin, and particularly, was the one that was the savior. This is the asset class that's going to defy inflation, and this is your hedge against it. This is your and really it's kind of not. It's like a store of value in a way. It's like
that's what it's being marketed as now more.
Right,
so,
because it didn't the narrative that it was sold on, it didn't meet that in the market. So I don't know, like, I think it's important for diversification. I just don't know. Again, you can take this to the logical extreme, and eventually, social credit scores and cryptocurrency, crypto global currency, crypto country USDCs, it's another control mechanism. And again, people are going to say, well, that's a conspiracy theory, that doesn't happen. But you're seeing it happen. You're seeing it happen in China right now already.
I think Jesse's going to have a pretty bad credit score, social credit score.
Social credit.
I think the three of us would be...
I think we're in trouble.
I'm just trying to get my social credit score up so I can hang out with you tomorrow. But no, I mean, certainly, I don't think you can make a coherent argument against the fact that cryptos have been an important bridge in the gap between what we currently think of as currency and central bank digital currency. You wouldn't get there without people having some level of understanding and comfort with the blockchain and with sort of an alternative way to look at money, really.
Right.
So, if there's a conspiracy to tie social credit score into easily verifiable spending habits and patterns, aka we know what you've done with your money, if there is a conspiracy to do that, cryptos have been an important step on that road to get there. And then I want to go back, even though the technology is incredible, right? So it's not sort of a good bad argument. It's just sort of acknowledging what is. I think blockchain technology is fascinating and important and powerful and is going to be here and so on and so forth.
Here.
But it has also played that role. So, but I think getting back to what you were, saying a minute ago in terms of the chicken or the egg question, if you study historically, when things happen, whether that's financial crisis or whether that's war, really being the principal ones, you can draw a lot of correlation between the point you're at in the cycle in the currency. Excuse me, I'm swearing. There's a word for this I couldn't think of earlier, which I still can't think of, which is bothering me. But wherever you're at in the cycle of the money supply, and what plays out then, some would argue, as a result. So, and it goes back. Some of this stuff is too much for today, but it goes back to the accounting, right? It goes back to the accounting of credits and debits, essentially, in terms of population and money supply and how all of that fits together. So you could make a very coherent argument, whether it's right or wrong, but you can make a very coherent argument that and that's, I think, why we're at the tops of those things you mentioned, or potentially are at the tops. But you can make a very coherent argument that mathematically we're near the end of this cycle in terms of central banks around the world being able to create more debt-based currency, more currency with interest and debt attached to it, without there being a reset. And so what do we have? Well, we have a financial reset that we're up against. What else do we have? We have the potential of a major, international conflict where population could be reduced, where countries' credits and debits would be altered through that process, and then potentially even change to a totally digital, currency system, which would have some different math, metrics, calculations, attached to it in terms of how it's created and how that all functions. So,
and that's also not, to do that in the West particularly, it's not a big stretch. Like the economy effectively functions as a digital economy already.
Right.
Like, people aren't using cash. People are using credit and debit cards. Well, what did you just say? Accounting? Credits and debits? Credit card, debit card, that's what they are. They're electronic. It's just electronic numbers in a system. So that's how most people transact. They transact, and then even now, people person to person, friend to friend, family to family, we're not giving cash anymore. I'm sending you PayPal. I'm sending you Venmo. I'm sending you. It's not even real cash. It's just debits and credits. It's a debit and credit, and that's it. So you go to the store, it's debits and credits. You go to the car wash, you put your debit card in. You don't, half these things don't even have places where you can put real physical currency anymore. So it's not a stretch to say, hey, when oh my God, there's a central digital currency. We already have one, right? It's just not really officially called that, and it's
not on the blockchain.
It's not on the blockchain, right? So, so it's, people that say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory, or that would never happen, or it's already happened. You don't have a choice. It's already done. It's done. The system is in place. The next step is coming at some point. And that's the block or the cryptographically not controlled. What's the word? Cryptographically. What is that? Cryptographic securitized currency. It's in the public. It's there, right? And you look at all these other cryptocurrencies, and everything's come down, but it's not like it's a new concept anymore. You've got tiendas in the freaking Andes Mountains of Ecuador that accept Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Are you kidding me? Like it's not Bitcoin's adoption cycles are. There's a public ETF. I mean, there's the rich. Elon Musk has publicly bought Bitcoin, like the richest man in the world. Like there's it's not like this is early stage in Bitcoin's life cycle, guys. It's so even if a lot of the Bitcoin tops for the next market I hear are anywhere from 150 to 250 and some higher than that. But at 35,000 now, that's like what, a 6x, a 7x, which great. That's a great return, but it's not to get these Bitcoin returns that people have talked about that truly were the early adopters, that people that were mining Bitcoin or buying it for $20 or $100, when they got from $20 or $100 to 30,000 or 50,000, those are those outrageous, life-changing returns. Bitcoin from here, it's not early anymore. We're not in that cycle for those types of returns unless things go crazy hyperbolic, and then all bets are off. I mean, if Bitcoin goes to $1 million, like, I don't think that's realistic, Well,
it's also interesting to think about, like, does it decouple at some point from other asset classes or not? Is the interesting part. Like, does it ever become crypto in general? Like, does it ever become that hedge that you talked about? Or does it not? Does it? Which is, it's an interesting.
And it would be, for that to happen, in my opinion, it would almost have to be truly decentralized, and it's really not. Like,
it's going in the other direction.
It's kind of going the other way. Right, it's getting institutionalized.
I'm looking at statistics here because I listen to Bitcoin people. I haven't so much lately, but I've always heard though. Of course, you guys have your laptops. I got my little phone here, but I can Google as well. There's 106 million people who use Bitcoin in the world. 106 million out of now 8 billion. That's less than 0.2% of the world population.
But your grandma knows about it, though.
Oh yeah, but that doesn't mean they're using it. Most people don't use crypto. It's still in the early adopting phase. Now, it's still, of course, it's not like the very beginning where nobody knew about it. A lot of people know about it, but very few people actually own or use crypto in general. It's
Other than the richest man in the world that everybody taught, like, dude, the Bitcoin S-curve, it's like the downside of the S-curve now. The adoption phase.
I don't know if there's a downside, but it's just flattens out. But does it actually go down?
S-curve, yeah.
S-curve.
No, yeah.
Interesting, because for example, statistically, if we're going to talk about crypto, there's only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be mined or created.
How many Satoshis?
Yeah, so
Satoshi's the real.
No, of course.
Right, yeah.
But there's 21 million Bitcoin, which about 4 to 6 million of those might be lost forever.
How many Satoshis in a Bitcoin?
100,000. I don't know. I'm
not
not sure either.
Oh, okay.
But still,
it's way more, because I think that's part of the way Bitcoin, the Bitcoin narrative is framed. That people see Bitcoin is 21 million,
sure,
or whatever, but it's really Satoshis are the actual coin.
They can be divided into
right.
multiple,
So, but the Satoshis, there's trillions. I don't know. Let's Google it. Let's see.
Yeah, Google it.
Because.
But I didn't finish my statistic. Is that 21 million Bitcoin, and there's more than 21 million millionaires in the world. So there's not enough Bitcoin for every millionaire to own one Bitcoin. And I guess it's kind of a vague statistic, but the point is that it's a scarce resource in a sense. Now
it's only scarce because it's framed that way. That's my point, bro.
Yeah,
it's framed.
I just mean
to make it more powerful. It's a logical fallacy.
Yeah. So the point is that if you own a Bitcoin, you'll always be the minority. It's very unlikely that people will be able to own one Bitcoin. Now you could subdivide it and break it into small units, of course, but still the point is that owning one Bitcoin it will be a very unusual or
even if we take that hypothesis as accurate, you can always build layers on top of layers. I mean, that's quite literally how we got to the point we're at now with the money system, right?
What's after a trillion? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have no idea.
Yeah. So there's 100 million Satoshis in every Bitcoin. So 21 million times 100 million, it's whatever the number after a trillion is.
Yeah. So owning a Satoshi is pennies.
Well, right, but that's how it should be framed. Like, if you own a Bitcoin, it's a Satoshi. Like, Satoshi is really the mechanism gets traded. That's how many there really are in existence. right? Not 21 million. So it's really easy to make it seem like a scarce resource when you say there's only 21 million. You know, it's like, well, there's less 100 millionaires or billionaires, like there's $1 billion bill. Well, there's less of them. Well, of course there are. You know, but how many pennies are there in there? You know, like how many, you know, so it's just a way that the narrative gets framed that makes it seem more scarce than it is my point, right? So when we talk about 21 million, well, yeah, there's only that few.
It also has no more inherent value than any of the other currencies that we're using. I mean, and you can always build systems on top of systems. Like I remember, semi-related, I remember reading many, many years ago a paper that Alan Greenspan had put out around like 1971 or something, where he was, when they were when the gold window was being closed under Nixon, the last connection between actual gold and silver and the currency, Greenspan came out and said, we will never, in this paper I read, we will never monetize the debt. Don't worry about it, right? We will never monetize the debt, which of course he then oversaw the monetization of the debt over his entire, you know, reign thereafter. But it went in steps to get away from the original hard asset of gold and silver, right? So we had gold and silver, and then we're trading paper that represents our gold and silver, and then we're trading paper that represents a portion, right, of the gold and silver, and then we're getting rid of that entirely, and we're now just trading, you know, pieces of paper or digital pieces of paper. So you can always build, on top of the original, you know, whatever it is. In this case, we're talking about Bitcoin. You can always build in layers on top of that, but without, you know, I think we probably did the crypto stuff. This wasn't supposed to be a crypto episode, but interesting conversation nonetheless.
Should bring a crypto expert here.
And for the record, like I'm not against Bitcoin. Like I just want people to frame it the right way so that they're not expecting to get the same returns that the true early adopters got. That's all. Like to get a 500% return on Bitcoin at this price means we have to get to $200,000 in Bitcoin. That's a 500% return. So if you're thinking you're gonna be a millionaire buying Bitcoin, you better put a big chunk of capital in, or you're not going to be a millionaire. You know, like if that's your goal, right? Because then the ratio of, all right, if 1,000% return, then Bitcoin's $400,000 from this point. That's 1,000% return. Well, is that realistic? If Bitcoin is $400,000 times 21 million, all right, well, is that realistic? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, since we're talking about this, let's put this into context of potential scenarios, right? So, Brandon, what do you if we get hyperinflation?
More so than we are actually having, or like reported, or real?
No, I mean I'm talking like Venezuela style hyperinflation. Then what do you think crypto does in that environment? And then my other question is, well, no, actually let's start there.
So I believe that before I don't believe we'll get hyperinflation in the current system. I think they'll flip the switch to the quantum financial system before hyperinflation rears its ugly head in a real way in the West. So it does. But like, do we like in an environment where currency is devaluing in a significant way? Not that it isn't already, but right, it's boiling frog already, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is. But like, does crypto become a hedge in your opinion? Unless because I mean, go to CoinGecko and look how many cryptos there are. There's a I don't even know. I'm gonna probably overstate, but there's 100,000 different types of cryptos. Do you even know?
I don't know if it's that much.
There's a ton.
But you and I could create one today if we want.
Right. We can create a crypto, create a market. We can create a crypto right now in 10 minutes. We can make it the Jesse coin. The Jesse the Jesse coin. You guys want to see the Jesse coin? Comment Jesse coin below. We can create a Jesse coin, create a million coin supply. We can give ourselves each a third of the supply, and then to set. Then I could sell you one coin of mine for $1. And then what happens to our market cap? Now we set a market price. Now your third of the million is worth $333,000 because I bought a coin for like, it's so silly.
Yeah, the market cap is not real.
The market cap's not real. Like, so anybody can do that. 10-year-old kids are doing
it's real
this.
in a liquid market, right?
Well, it's real in any market that somebody's willing to actually pay. But my
Yeah.
point is that there's thousands and thousands of all these different cryptos because and then there's people gamifying and taking advantage, and so you don't have like the one crypto to save the day. People want to say it's Bitcoin. Maybe it is. I don't know. Ethereum it seems more useful from a transaction perspective. There's other things they have with smart contracts on top of Ethereum. Again, I don't know, but there's not like there's this one thing that's going to help save because everybody's in their thing.
It's the Cbdc, baby.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right, that's going to be the savior because everybody, Carl, you talked about there's only 1 million Bitcoin holders at this point. That's because
100 million addresses.
Whatever. Right, 100 million Bitcoin addresses. Some of them
owners,
are probably the same people. But point being, when it's so publicly out there, in the freaking Andes Mountains in the Southern Ecuador, they know what Bitcoin is. They accept it. They know how to do that. Your grandma knows. My grandma knows. Like the richest man in the world knows. Everybody knows. Why haven't they adopted yet? Because they're not. They're scared or they're not sure. Right?
Because it's highly volatile.
Because it's highly volatile. So Bitcoin is never going to be the solution for them then. Or any of these cryptos, not just Bitcoin, because those are inherent attributes to the asset class. But what will not have that? It will not. The CBDCs. Right? So that's going to be the piece that gets people over that psychological block to enter crypto. It's going to be like, oh, the government. Because again, it's just like we talked about with the cognitive dissonance.
Right back into the matrix.
Of not understanding these things that are happening from a control perspective. They're not going to look at it to that logical extreme like we talked about. They're going to look at it like, no, this is actually the legit crypto. It's the one the government's behind. It's this one. This is the safe crypto to get. And then you're going to start seeing the adoption into that, right? So over time, does that bleed off into the alternative crypto world or what we would call blue chips in some of these? Yes, eventually, but that big, step change of adoption is going to happen with the stuff we don't want it to happen with, in my opinion.
Well,
does that answer that?
Yeah.
There's more we can say, but I've seen some theories that the CIA and central banks, they were behind Bitcoin. Alan Greenspan and some of these people in 2008 that they actually were behind it. But that's it's a theory, speculation. But that would be interesting. Yeah. if that was the CBDC type of thing.
Right.
That was my assumption when it came out.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know about it in 2008, but people were talking to me about it in 2010, 11, 12 in there. And when I looked into it, that was my immediate assumption. Was this is an on-ramp to a global digital currency. Yeah. No, thank you. I certainly wish that I had made a different decision at that time. Yeah. Well, let's pivot. So cryptos are definitely one of the things that you're probably going to be thinking about if you're looking to get out of the kind of old paradigm thought process in terms of assets, obviously, but also just all the stuff we kind of were talking about, security and lifestyle and all of it. So, I think if you're someone who's looking at life from anything close to the perspective we're sharing today, things like crypto, things like land, ideally productive land. Obviously, gold and silver are things that people look at who are thinking in these ways. Where's your food and water come from? What's the climate that you live in? And what does life look like where you're at if the current infrastructure of goods and resources or just sort of the kind of support that exists for the economy overall were to lessen, were to become not what it is today, which is, right now, you've got 17 boxes of Cheetos, like, let me inspect that, right? Like, and there's cling, ding, ding, and there's a whole system behind supply chains and really just life. Like, really anything you're doing, you've got to check first. Like, how do you do this? Am I allowed? Is it okay? What's the process? So if those kinds of things were to decrease, like, where would you want to live? How would you want to set up your life? Where would you have your assets? And what would you have your assets, so on and so forth. So, for me, right, going back to the beginning, I'm sitting there kind of figuring these things out in the late 2000s, early 2010s, is that even what you say? And saying to myself, okay, well, what's my MBA worth in an environment where things are breaking down a bit, or there's some hiccups in one form or another? What's my MBA worth? Well, I don't know, but I think less than it would be now, right? Mm-hmm. I think that would not be as valuable to me in that environment than it is today. The other question I'm asking myself is, or one of a few other questions is, what are my, I had a couple of buildings at the time in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, for those of you familiar. I had a couple of buildings at the time. What are these buildings worth if there's not a functioning debt market, or if people can't borrow to buy them? Like, the entire U.S. real estate market is based on credit, right? Like, the whole thing. Yeah. Like you take credit out of the U.S. real estate market. I'm sure smarter people than me have done studies on this. Like, what is your median home price go from to? Does it drop by 10%, 80%, 98%? Like, I don't know. Right. But it drops by a lot, right?
It's much more volatile.
Yeah, I mean, not just volatile. I mean, if the calculation on buying any asset, but real estate in particular, because of the credit, because of the way that that's financed, if the formula on that, the calculation on that is how much cash exists to buy it, and that's what the pricing mechanism is based on. Yeah, I mean, it's worth a fraction of what stuff is worth today, because now you're actually in supply and demand at that point. Yeah. You're actually circulation. Yeah. Okay, let's see some transactions, find out what the price is, right. And all of a sudden, your $2.5 million brownstone, in some hot shit neighborhood. I've sworn twice now. I'm very excited about this topic. Is not 2.5 million. Maybe it's $150, maybe it's 300. I don't know. But when you're evaluating those things, as I was at that time, you start to reassess what's important to you. What does New York City look like if the supply chain breaks down? It's not a great place to be. So these were kind of some of the calculations that I was going through at that time, and ultimately, obviously, I want to tie this into the context of Ecuador, but I think there's lots of things we'll get into on that topic, but I'll just kick it off here. One of the things that I like about this country, and others, of course, but that I like about this country in some of those scenarios, is that the government here is not involved in everything. There is not tremendously sophisticated systems of regulation and tracking and licenses and fees and all that kind of permissions. And the supply chain is uniquely simple. Like, it is the most unsophisticated supply chain you can find. And we talked about a little bit of this on some other episodes, but even getting away from the obvious stuff of climate and soil and water and community, and I think we should touch on all of those ancillary things are in a great spot as well here, from my perspective.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing when you're talking about the debt market in fueling the real estate market cycles in the West, in the US, in Canada, in Europe as well. It's even more sophisticated because it's not just the debt, then there's the derivatives on the debt, and then there's different tranches of how they trade those mortgage-backed securities. So there's layers on top of layers on top of layers of leverage, and then they do they have different accounting standards to be able to help control some of the prices on mark to market, mark to model, mark to make believe. That's FASB 157 for all you accounting nerds, or it was back 10 years ago when I was in that world. But that allows these financial institutions to manipulate their balance sheets. So you don't even truly know some of the impacts until things start getting worse, and they have to start selling things when they don't want to. And that's why things happen fast that way, because they're so layered in the derivatives of leverage. There's so many levers on levers, so it happens fast when it starts to crumble. But what's interesting about, and we get a lot of comments on this on the channel, on property videos or property highlights and stuff, when they talk about pricing in Ecuador. And the interesting thing, and you guys can chime in on this, is that because the market isn't so debt based, that there still are real estate cycles here, but they're more actually based on supply and demand, and they're more controlled by, we get the comments, all these foreigners are driving up prices. Well, foreigners in all of Ecuador are a minute portion of the population. And even in Vilcabamba, places like Vilcabamba and Cuenca, there's still a very, very small percentage of people buying homes. The demand, particularly in our area, in Vilcabamba and Malacatos, Lojanos buy their second homes, they buy vacation homes, they buy weekend homes in these areas. This is where they want to live. It's 45 minutes, half an hour from where they live. This is where they do that. So that's, I don't know what percentage that is, but that's a majority of the demand in the area. It's really not, the gringo, the 1,000 gringos or 2,000 gringos that live here.
In 2013, there was 22,000 U.S. citizens living in Ecuador.
The whole country. Right.
At that time, like a 17 million person country.
And right. There's statistics for sooner, like
no, I mean I don't know
more recent statistics.
Even if it's 5x, 10x,
which it has, it might have doubled.
Right.
At
I
most.
mean, we're still at 250,000 max, maybe.
Not a chance.
Which is not a chance, right? And how many in this area? Couple thousand. Couple thousand max, right? Yeah. So, again, so the point is that's kind of goes to your point of showing what more of a market supply and demand model looks like. Because we see it in a small way in the real estate cycles. It's not driven by all these debt based. The gringos aren't here coming with, Anyway, you get the point.
Well, I lived through a couple of those cycles that I can share what they looked like, right? So, starting in 2014 and continuing into 15 and 16, we had a collapse here financially that would, if there was as much debt in the system as there is in the U.S., would have looked, in my opinion, considerably worse, like 10x worse than the absolute bottom in Las Vegas and some of the markets in Florida in 2008, 2009. Mm-hmm. Like where they were giving houses away, like houses that were selling for $250,000 were selling for $10,000 a year later.
Wow.
In some of these markets in Vegas and in Florida during that time. I think we would have been, why did that happen? There was a hiccup in the debt markets.
Right.
A hiccup. It was like, the banks don't have any money, government's coming in, okay, now the banks have money. That's basically what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And we lost 90% or more on value in certain markets. In 2014, 15, and into 16, wealth was leaving this country hand over fist.
Right.
I mean, hand over fist. Okay, well, how did that look in the real estate market? It was dead. There was not as many sales, and prices dropped a few percent. Right. It was harder to sell for sure. Mm-hmm. Right? It was a $500,000 house now, which is a very expensive house for here. A $500,000 house now is sellable in today's market in Ecuador, and I'm not talking about some of the markets that are more expensive, like maybe Guayaquil and Quito, but. And whereas at that time, it was very difficult to sell a house. You'd have to discount pretty substantially to sell that house. That was it. Like that, and we had capital flight, literally. Like the capital flight you read about, lived through it. Mm-hmm. 2014, 15, 16. It just meant a quieter market. And now, I would argue, as the politics changed and the economic conditions changed as a result, starting in 16 up until now, we're kind of in a time that back home would be a boom. The banks are lending, people are coming, there's stability, so on and so forth. And we've seen that. I mean, Vilcabamba has expanded tremendously in the last handful of years. Loja as well. What does that look like? There's some houses going up.
Right.
There's some buildings going up.
Right.
Prices are slowly, incrementally increasing.
Right. That's a critical point, I think, because that's another difference between the West real estate markets in here. Not only are the cycles less volatile, but and I've only been here for 2 years, but just hearing the conversations that you both have had together and have shared with me about your experience here and what those cycles look like, it seems like the process is stretched out. It's a longer. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but
yeah,
but it's
right.
it's like slower. It's not only
because
less
not
volatile,
as much debt in the system,
but slow, but slower overall. So it's not like even in a boom phase you're getting outside of some of the super densely populated metropolis, you're not getting 5 offers on a property. It's not the same where you get that in real properties in the West, in the United States. These farm country properties, you're getting multiple offers. Well, it doesn't look like the market's slower here. It's less volatile that way. So I think that's important for people to understand, because they just assume, oh, it's a real estate market there, it's a real estate market here, this is how it operates. It must operate the same there, and it really doesn't.
And because it's mostly a cash market,
exactly,
is the main reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, there are banks but the interest rates are extremely high, and there's very few people that use those types of mortgages, right?
So in 2010, so this is post debt crisis, I bought my first property with 106% financing. So all I had to do was show the bank, I've got the credit score and I've got the income and I have the cash in the bank that you guys need to hit your metrics, which wasn't a lot. And they said, sure, we'll finance this $800,000 property for you at 106%.
Wow.
And they calculated in all the rental income. That's part of the equation. So it's not. Wow. I didn't make very much money at that time at all.
Right.
I mean, I think between myself and my girlfriend at the time, who was signing with me, I think we were able to show like $90,000.
Wow.
Like it was not. You shouldn't be able to get much for that. No. You should be able to borrow like $50,000, maybe.
Right. Like 20.
But I had this magician, mortgage broker. But the point is, I got 106% financing. I had no business getting that loan.
Right.
It worked out in my case. For many people, didn't.
Yeah.
But it worked out. Here, to your point, Carl. Here, you're putting 30% down to get a mortgage, and then you're borrowing at double-digit interest rates. Hence, you don't have competition for properties that are on the market because the debt financing isn't available in the same way. While we were talking, this article came in. Synchronicity, baby. This article came in that is hilarious based on what we're talking about. So the title is, Study Shows That Most Small Ecuadorian Businesses Are Off the Tax Rolls and Have No Accounting Systems. The first paragraph, according to a study by the Network of Development Financial Institutions, RFD, 65% of small Ecuadorian businesses do not have taxpayer registration numbers, pay no taxes other than VAT, which is the value-added tax, and some other purchases. It goes on, it's hilarious, but that's kind of illustrates the lack of controls, the simplicity in regulations, the simplicity in the economy, and the results of those kinds of things. That just being an example creates a different lifestyle, right? So we don't have all the debt in the system, so everyone's kind of spinning their wheels at warp speed to keep up with all of their costs that are consistently and continually rising because of the inflation, because of the increased money, and then all of the money supply, and then all the taxes on top of that, and all of the built-in costs that all the regulation causes through the economy. You have a situation where back home, everybody has tremendous amounts of pressure on them to keep up with whatever lifestyle they're trying to live. So you've got your mortgage, you've got your car note, you've got your car insurance, you've got your property taxes, and the list goes on. Like, that's a very small list.
That's an important one, like the property tax one, because that's, people have, even when you pay off your house, you pay off your dream home, your retirement home you're going to retire in, and you got $1 million property, you got a $7,000, $20,000 a month tax bill. Like it's wild. Like so you pay off your property and you're still paying rent.
Sure,
it's paid off. Like that.
No, I mean I mentioned this somewhere. It might have been on the pod, but my grandmother died probably 10 years ago, and she spent the last number of years not in this home I'm about to talk about. So we're talking about probably even earlier than that. We're probably talking like 2000, early 2000s. So in the early 2000s, on a property in Long Island, she got up to like $35,000 a year in property taxes.
Yeah.
I mean,
I might have said month. I meant year. Yes.
Okay.
Did I say month?
I don't
think
know.
you might have said month. Yeah, that's expensive.
Yeah.
But what are property taxes here, Jesse?
0.1% of the assessed value annually. So $100 on 100 grand.
Nice.
Of assessed value, which is considerably lower than
in the
market
rural
value.
areas, typically. The rural areas, the assessed value is lower. In the urban areas, is about
maybe a little closer.
A little closer is what I'm understanding. Yeah.
So yeah. I mean,
I'd love to jump in and give some real life example of what you're talking about when it comes to like the food supply, the regulations and stuff here in Ecuador. You gave that example of the pig farmer in the U.S., right? Who they came and killed all his pigs. In Ecuador, any farmer can have any type of animal they want to grow, cows, pigs, goats, sheep, whatever it is. There's almost no regulations, if there's any. I don't think there's any regulations.
Not to my knowledge, there may be, but it's
which
not.
For some people that like regulations, they might think, well, the pig farmer, he's not growing the right types of pigs, and they need to vaccinate the animals and give them medication, and that's why they has to be regulated so the consumer doesn't get sick, right? Whereas in Ecuador, you buy raw milk from the farmer directly from the cow on the same day, basically, right? With no receipts, no anything. So we don't know exactly how the animals are grown, but here everything is pretty much grass-fed in the mountains, organic, and really high quality, actually. Another example is right where we have our office in town. Every single day of the week, there are people who walk with baskets of fruits and vegetables, and they come to our door and offer us, cucumbers and peppers and lemons. There's a lady, Luz Maria, she's so sweet. She comes in with her bananas. She always has coffee and honey. And these people, like you said, 60% of the businesses here don't declare anything because those are the types of businesses, basically. They grow the food on their land. They sell it to people on the street or wherever it is in stores, and there's very little accounting, if any.
Or out of their store,
out of their house. Right, exactly. So, I don't know. I personally prefer that. I personally prefer buying directly from the farmer with no tax, with no regulation, anything. All cash, goes directly to them, and I know where my food comes from.
Excuse me, guys. I'm rudely...
Tell us more about these cigarettes, Jesse.
These are organic, local. They got all kinds of flowers in them. Brandon makes fun of me. Don't worry.
He's a good friend of yours, right? The guy who makes this.
Yes, very good friend.
Sebastian, what's up, Sebastian?
Yeah,
it's organic tobacco.
Organic tobacco.
No, I want to jump in real quick on the direct to farmer meats, like because you're seeing all the reports now that in commercially produced livestock and cattle, and that they are getting mRNA injections now.
Oh, wow.
Pretty broad based, and the cool thing here for me, like we can go talk to Miguel and get it right from his family farm or Franco, and right from their farms, and they're not injecting them with mRNA. They're not injecting them with antibiotics
or growth hormones
or any of that stuff. So, I just picked up some beef liver, like amazing beef liver. No, chemical free, no mRNA, any of that stuff. So if you care about that stuff, the opportunity to do that here, it's much harder. You could probably do it in the States. It's just probably much harder.
And
to
it would
source.
have to be technically legal, right?
And it would. I don't
to buy directly from raw milk is illegal in most states, right?
Yeah. We were buying it illegally for a while. I mean, it was like we were driving like an hour, and it was like $12 or $14 a gallon, and they just kept raising the price, and the closer farms would get shut down, and we were, eventually it got where it didn't make sense for us to do it. But yeah, that stuff was regulated. I don't know enough about the meat processing, if they're required certain injections to be. I would imagine for some commercially produced meat, they have to meet some of those standards, but there still exists that in the West that they still have small family farms where they have 100 herd of cattle or 50 or 20, and and it's they're not doing it like commercially. They're still selling it, but they're not doing it like the big commercial. They're selling to their friends and family, or they have a co-op or things like that. So we were part of those in the States, but those are harder and harder to find. And then the price point, what's the trade? The price point's different, and
Right.
what you get and what you have to spend to get it there versus a place like Ecuador. And that's something I wanted to kind of go back on. You talked about the value and the value for you, like what things are worth. And we were talking about asset classes and stuff as it relates to investments and then lifestyle. And I think we should separate the two, because there's kind of market value and then personal value. Like so things are worth, there's a market value of asset classes, of different attributes of different asset classes, but then how you value them. And that's kind of the difference I've noticed between people that that have left their country and have made the move to places like Ecuador. They have a different mindset on that, where they think differently. They're less conditioned by what everyone thinks they should think, what they should do, and they're more thoughtful or mindful about what they actually think and what's important, what they value, right? Their personal values. So that goes into play, because then you can decide, right? All right, you see this stuff happening in the financial system, so that's the market value side of things. Well, what do I really value? And right, we've talked about these a lot of times, but we want clean water, we want clean air, we want to know where our food comes from, we want to know our farmers, we want clean, healthy lifestyle, because those are the things we can control and we value, or to some extent we have more control over. And Ecuador is like that holding place, like that container for that, at least in the southern part of the country where we are. It allows us to make that value real, like to transact that way. And then when you're thinking, and then once you do that, then you start thinking about your financial assets differently. And it's not just about what the market value is, it's but what do I really value, and where do I see these trends going, and what is going to become more valuable in the future, not because of market value, right? So, in my opinion, I think we're near tops in the real estate, commercial and residential real estate market in the West. So I think we're also near tops in the stocks market and the bond market. So if all the traditional financial assets are near tops and you're diversified in them, are you really diversified or not? I don't know. I would question.
Yeah, they're all levered to the same instrument.
They're all right. So what does true diversification look like? Now, that gets scary for some people. Investing in foreign real estate, investing in foreign business, that's scary, because, they just don't know about that. They haven't taken the time to understand the details, or at the level they need to feel comfortable to do that. But those are the opportunities, in my opinion, that really diversify people. And based on the risks we see and we've talked about in the West and in that debt-based system, the attributes outside of the country of the North America, those are becoming more valuable, right? Inherently over time, I suspect. Pristine places with, waterfalls and streams and, fresh air and, less, no airplanes most of the time. And, it's not those types of places. Like, we live in a beautiful place, man. It's a special place, and the attributes that it has are becoming more valuable, particularly when the West, that system starts to crumble more, and we're seeing all those cracks. So not only from a market value perspective do they get more valuable, but they're valuable to us personally, right? This is the lifestyle we want. This is what we want to raise our children in. This is the community we want to support, that lives and believes and does these things. So it's like Ecuador is like this magical place in a way where it kind of combines the two. Not only are the attributes, can you feel a little bit, you can get some solace, some comfort in diversifying into a place like this. But then if you actually move here too, and you get that personal value and being part of this special community and living your values every day, man, it's powerful, man. It's a powerful thing.
Yeah, and I mean that's a great point, and I think we need to bring community into the conversation as well, because that is a huge piece. But so we'll get there in 2 seconds. But just going back to your point earlier, in turn, we would, even if you're not a conspiracy theorist, I think we would all admit that there's probably people in the world in the know, so to speak, on certain things, right? Mm-hmm. So there's people that know more or less about various things. I think we can all admit that. What's Bill Gates doing? He's buying farmland. The Bush family bought I don't remember, 500,000 hectares or something in Paraguay, some years back, which had one of the world's largest water aquifers under it. Those investments make sense in certain environments, right? Which is kind of what we're talking about. But yeah, community for me, is critical as well, because if you're thinking about lifestyle and just all of it, right? Like where you want to live, where you want your assets, what do you want your lifestyle to look like? Being in a society and in a place where where the communities are very tight knit, where the social ties go back hundreds of years, literally, and that has not yet been fully inundated and influenced by sort of the modern media ethos of sort of superficiality and what we should be striving for as people. It lends itself to an environment where people actually care about each other, where they actually take care of one another, where they know one another, and it's the interactions here tend to be very human, as opposed to, well, what can I get out of this interaction, and what are the rules and regulations surrounding what we're trying to accomplish? It's much more here. It's much more here like, what does the person need and how can we help, right? And that's a very different calculation than I was used to back home. If you need just even simple stuff, right? Like if you were back home and you're moving from one house to another, essentially, and there's some exceptions to this, but essentially you're not calling your friends to give you a hand. They're busy, they have their own lives, you'd feel bad asking. They might do it out of obligation, but they might be a little pissed off that that you're asking for this kind of. You're hiring a moving company, or you're doing it yourself, right? Here, in a situation like that, people would have no problem, stopping what they're doing, lending a hand, helping you accomplish whatever you're trying to accomplish. But anyways, the community part of it for me is also critical in the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to your point, most expats that live here, I wouldn't say all of them, but the majority for sure, are people that don't have a full-time job, a 9-to-5 job, right? Even us, we work, but we have flexibility with our schedules. And most people we know might work online, but so I've helped a lot of people move here, and I know the people are available to help because they don't have these other obligations. They don't have to work 9 to 5. So.
Yeah, but the Ecuadorian community, I mean, they work all very hard, yes. But it's that, I was really referring to the local community. Expats are expats, we're weirdos, man. We got we come with all our stuff, but the local community it's just so human. It's such a humanity-based perspective.
Sure.
All right, do we want to we can either wrap, we can keep going on this a little bit, we can talk a little bit about some of the inconveniences of life here, raising kids here, stuff that we can either go now or cut off for another time.
I think we're good for today. We'll have another episode for tomorrow, next week, whenever.
All right.
We did want to talk about our birth stories, but we never got there, so.
It's cliffhanger.
Cliffhanger for next one.
So if you guys want to hear about Carl giving birth, just put it in the comments, and we will be sure to do.
What was that?
We're getting to the point where right. We're getting to the point where that's potentially possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've proven that. So.
I have. All right. I was
Guys,
there.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. Again, please put a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. If you're interested in Ecuador, shoot us an email, info@abecuador.com. That's A as in apple, B as in boy, Ecuador.com. I used to roll into the 800 number as well.
Wow.
During these, but we have the 800 number has gone by the wayside in our new modern world of fancy technology like WhatsApp and Skype and stuff like that. So, okay, guys, you got a tagline to say.
On that note, we hope to see you here one day.
So until then,
Get a better tagline.
See you next time.
See you next time.
ciao guys.
If you're interested in real estate properties, all of our property videos will now be uploaded on a different channel. Please click the link in the description down below.